Mackie here of The Eloquent Entrepreneur. And today we're talking to a very special guest. She's actually a friend and colleague and client of mine and an amazing designer. And her title, I guess, is really self-explanatory in a way, but it really describes who she is and what she really values and what she does. So she's an environmentalist, she's an educator, and she's a sustainable graphic designer. And her name is Emma Fanning, and she's the founder of her company called Little Fox Design. And she's also a carbon neutral design studio, and we're going to ask her about that in a little bit. And she's also been named one of the 10 to watch on Douglas Magazine recently. So here she is, Emma Fanning. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a while since we talked about chatting, and I'm so happy to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on your show.
Thank you. Well, you are a huge inspiration to me, and I know you are to many other people. So I'd love to just give you the floor and just tell us about you and what you do and how you're making a difference now in your business now that you've really made a focus on sustainable design.
Yeah, so basically I'm a sustainable graphic designer and brand designer. So what that means is that I help companies and small businesses design their entire visual identity. So that includes their logos, their color palettes, all of their marketing materials, their business cards, anything like that. And so in terms of anything that we design together, especially if it's print design, I have a real focus on making it as environmentally friendly as possible. So this most commonly means printing on 100% recycled paper, making sure that forestry supply chains are verified and that the workers and the ecosystems are both being treated fairly. And using plant-based inks instead of petroleum-based inks, and just making sure that what I create for my clients can be recycled and is creating a minimal impact on the planet. And I think that's something that a lot of designers don't necessarily think about because, you're working with a printer and you print some business cards and you don't really think anything else of it. But I think it's really important to sort of consider the entire life cycle of each thing that you create, because I am responsible for bringing things that didn't exist before into the world. And so it's very important to me that I minimize that impact and minimize that impact for my clients too, because I think it's really important going forward that we all are more eco-conscious.
For sure. And I love that you are so young. And I've been dying to ask you, I know this kind of switch in your brain came over a conference, and I'd love you to tell us like the journey that you came from and how did you kind of become so wise in your young age into be able to, a lot of young people maybe would just go, okay, well, I'll just keep doing what I was doing. But what happened with you and how did you, like what switched in your brain, I think is what people would like to know.
Yeah, so, I've been a designer for about 5-6 years now, and I've only been doing the sustainable design for about 1.5. And so a couple of years ago, I was really, I cared a lot about the environment. It was something that I always cared about as a child, going down to the ocean, living on the beach. It was really important part of my childhood. And, I growing up on the ocean, you sort of see changes in what's happening with the environment. And, at Tofino, I saw the sand dollars disappear. And, at Botanical Beach, I saw all the sea urchins go, and it just left with these like empty sandstone holes in the oceanscape. And, I noticed this, but I was sort of, I didn't know what to do. And, I started trying to make sustainable changes in my own life. So reducing my plastics, minimizing my, energy use and stuff, and just really seeing how I could make a difference with just my own actions. But I wasn't sure how to sort of combine that with my design work. And so I started looking for green graphic design, sustainable graphic design, what's out there, what can I do? And I didn't really find a whole lot. It was sort of something that had been talked about 10 years ago, and there were a few books, but they were out of date and there was a lot of misinformation there. And it was an okay starting spot, but there had been no sort of active research going on in the last 10 years for this field, and no one was really talking about it. So I was a little unsure whether or not this was something worth pursuing, whether or not it had a real impact, and whether or not my clients would care, because I sort of thought that they maybe wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to be at a conference, a design conference, the Adobe conference in Los Angeles. And there was a really sort of prominent figure in the design community who owned a big agency in LA. And he was doing a question and answer with people. And he had a real focus on sort of design business education. So I decided to ask him, what can designers do in terms of climate crisis and minimizing our impact? And, he laughed. He said, I don't think that's something that's worthwhile. Look after yourself first. Maybe when you're rich and successful, you can donate some money later. And hearing this come from such a big industry professional who is so widely respected it felt like such a betrayal. It was such a pivotal moment for me that I realized that, okay, I know that he's wrong, and I know that he is not thinking far enough in the future, and he is a smart individual, but he does not have the right sort of thinking for this. And I knew that even though I didn't know what to do, and I was going to have to figure it out and do all the work myself, I was going to just figure out how to be a sustainable designer and how to incorporate those practices in my work for my clients. And eventually I realized that this was basically just, I needed to read a lot. I needed to read about forestry. I needed to read about printing. I needed to read about paper. I needed to read about climate and emissions and what that actually means. I needed to read about trees and figure out, okay, they sequester all this carbon. What does this mean? How can I use this information to make more sustainable choices in my work? And basically the ticket is don't stop reading. So read as much as you can for the academic literature in your field, for adjacent things, even just really good nonfiction books that are not necessarily academic papers, but are still very informative. Read as much as you can on the topics that you're interested in. And that is the way of getting the knowledge that you need to be able to make good decisions in your work, especially if you're trying to go into a very niche field like I was. So yeah, I basically just read as much as I could. And, I have a bookshelf now of progressive nonfiction that I've consumed. And it's been incredibly helpful in terms of talking to my clients about what I'm doing, explaining why these things are important, and really helping them understand their place in both the world and the business community and how they can make a difference in their company and in the world by using more sustainable techniques or marketing in their business.
Yeah, and that's really amazing. And I was just thinking, what a testament to your generation. I am older than you, so I come from a different generation, but it just goes to show the values that each generation holds. So for somebody, I don't know how old this person is, but it really shows what the values are of that generation, and what they're really focusing on. And for you to be such a young person and really thinking outside of the box and saying no, that is how leaders are born. And I'm really proud of you for taking the reins of this fearlessly, and creating a movement. And now you're going to be, I think you've already positioned yourself as a thought leader in this area, and that you are going to direct people in that. And I know you're already directing people in this direction, which we'll get into a little bit more.
Thank you.
I guess one of the questions that I like to ask is, obviously the planet is a huge inspiration to why you're doing this. And that's, I think a given. But I'm just wondering where this strong passion and determination and focus comes from. And, how do you see this work or your movement in practice making a difference? Because I know you've been doing this for 1.5 years, and I know you've worked with companies and clients that are environmentally conscious and stuff like that. How is it manifesting now, and how do you see it making a difference, evidentially? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So basically, to answer the first part, and then the second part sort of has a multi pronged approach. But to answer the first part, my passion comes from the fact that honestly, I'm quite scared about the future. It's pretty terrifying to think about. The fact is, we have 10 years, well, 9 now, to fix our emissions and reduce the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And, we don't have a lot of time to do that. And if we fail to do that, there's no turning back from that. We've set off all these, chain reactions that honestly we can't fix. We do not have the power to fix them. There is no technology that will save us. So that eventually looks like a planet that is relatively uninhabitable by the time that I'm 60, 65, 70. And that is a short life. So this is something that is, as a young person, I'm very stressed about. Obviously, I have a lot of anxiety. And so my work, my passion comes from just trying to help myself understand these concepts better so that I can feel more comfortable in not necessarily what's happening, but I understand what will happen. And that helps me a lot feel more comfortable about the issues and more comfortable about how I can make changes in my life that has small impact, but can maybe inspire others. So right now I work a lot with obviously eco-conscious brands, but also business owners that are never really thought about it, but they're realizing, oh, this is something that's important. I want to make some changes. I don't know how. So I love working with those people too, because as long as people are interested and engaged and really want to sit down and take the time and maybe take a little bit of extra budget time or budget requirements to work on a sustainable solution, then that's really inspiring to me, because honestly, it's a really hard thing to figure out. There are so many different solutions, and there's so many different, people in power trying to direct conversations. And, we need to figure out what actually is the most sustainable thing to do. And so, I really love helping business owners figure that out. And so that's sort of something that I want to push a little bit more into in the coming year. And I want to offer sort of more consulting services for integrating green business practices into your business model and into your communication and messaging with your clients. So, you made these changes. Maybe you changed all your marketing materials over to 100% recycled paper. That's amazing. Now, how can we communicate that to your clients so that you can stand out from your competitors and really show the value that you bring and the care and commitment that you are trying to, start with switching over your marketing materials or whatever it is. And so I'd really love to have larger impact with that by being able to go in and do consulting with companies and really sort of evaluate more of their business than just perhaps their logo and color scheme.
Exactly. Yeah. And I see that you are doing a lot more. Part of the consulting is educating. And I'm just curious because I know you do work with and have worked with environmentally conscious, and I know you have policies around that. Maybe speak to that a little bit and how you, what challenges are you facing? Because I know there's, obviously the climate change deniers, and there's people that just are naive, right? And, all the different generations have different values. And, the older generation, I remember it took me ages to convince my dad to recycle.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, I think, in that area, but I'd love to hear from your point of view, what challenges you faced around those things.
So most of the challenge that I have is in the education component. I think there are a lot of people that really do care. And obviously there's going to be some climate change deniers, and there's going to be some people that just don't think that this is worth any amount of time. And I've had clients like that. And, I basically cut ties with them, and I was like, this isn't a positive relationship for either of us. It's not working out. I'm not the right fit for you as a designer. And I that's fine. Those people exist. Those aren't the people that I want to work with or really think that are worth spending time on, which is kind of harsh. But if someone is really deep in climate change denial, there's not a lot that I can actually say to them that is going to change their mind. I think there's a lot more power to be had in having conversations with people that are interested and just don't know where to start. Because, where do you start? The zero waste movement, recycling, emissions, walking more, biking, there's so many different facets to this movement. And, people that are maybe feeling shy or uncomfortable about making one change because they feel that they have to make all the changes at once then, and it's sort of like an all or nothing, zero sum. And, that's not true. It's perfectly fine to take small steps and just implement things one at a time, because any kind of transition or big life change that you're making, if you kind of go from all or nothing, you're not going to have much success. It's like transitioning over to a vegetarian or vegan diet. the
Yeah.
slower you do it, the more likely you're going to succeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Of course, it's important to keep in mind, planet timelines, but like for the average business owner, just making a few changes in terms of sustainable marketing can really have an impact. So it's mostly about talking to them and letting them know, oh, did you know your business cards have a plastic laminate on them, and that means they go to landfill. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people have no idea they're making these everyday decisions that they don't even think about but have a negative impact. And so it's
People
really
want
just
to know, I think. I know I
yeah.
want to know as a business owner, am I harming the planet by picking
Yeah.
cardstock over that, you know?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And it's so much to figure out, and that's where I come in and help people understand what their impact is, and maybe let them know about sort of bigger issues that they could work on with their company, and maybe that turns into something more. But I think it's really important getting those little wins in, because once you sort of start doing something and you achieve a success, like your business cards are 100% recycled paper and you're really proud of that and they look amazing, you're going to want to sort of like keep that positive energy and maybe go, oh, maybe I'll try my brochures next, or maybe I'll buy a different type of paper for my printer at home. And it's sort of like building on those small wins to have it be something that's like a really fun, positive experience, instead of like really negative sort of doom and gloom, like if I don't do this, the planet is going to like go on fire. But like it's about making it sustainable for people to make those changes and have them know about the education behind it and why they need to make them.
exactly. Yeah. Baby steps turn into sustainable steps. So I want to talk a little bit about, you say you were a carbon neutral design company.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to sort of talk about, because you are a young designer, a young business owner, and but you have done so much research and you know what you're talking about and you do walk the talk. And so I'd love you to sort of talk about that, and explain, like, that you are a living person who is walking the talk, and and you've given yourself accountability through your yearly environmental report. So maybe just chat about that a little bit, because I think it's really, really important.
Okay, for sure. So basically with my company, I have three sort of main sustainability strategies for my marketing right now, and just general practices. So I have an environmental policy, which basically is integrated into my contracts as well. So it discusses the fact that everything that I work with my clients is going to be printed on 100% recycled paper or other approved alternative that is environmentally friendly. And that is something they have to sign on and like actually be aware that this is what's happening. They can't change their mind later. And so it's something that I'm very upfront with my clients about from the very beginning. When I first get an inquiry call, I make it very clear that this is sort of what I do. And if they're not on board with that, then they have to go to someone else, because even if they like my design work, that's not enough to work with me. And so the second prong is my studio's carbon neutral. So basically what this means is I have worked to reduce the amount of emissions that my business produces as much as I possibly can. And of course, there are some things that I can't reduce, like taking the bus still has emissions, or the electricity that I use for my laptop. And so to offset those, I decided to partner with a local company in Vancouver called Offsetters. And so they sort of have a carbon credit situation where they fund carbon sequestration programs across the world, but mostly in BC. And then you can sort of purchase carbon credits to offset your carbon emissions, which they have a full calculator, and there's a whole process with how they, calculate what your emissions are. And so it's a very like structured process, and it takes several months to go through, just so that they're very clear that what you're reporting is accurate. You have to submit all your receipts, all your flights, all your everything. And then they vet it, and then they go through it, and then they give you a total of how many emissions that you are responsible for and how much that will be to offset them. So I have chosen to offset the emissions through basically reforestation projects on Quadra Island locally, and also protection of old growth forests in the Great Bear Rainforest in BC. So this was really important to me to sort of keep the projects local, because I'm operating down to BC. I think it's important to keep the money and projects locally, but also those ones are very oriented around, forest conservation and, protection of old growth forests. And I think that is really relevant to what I'm doing, of course, but also it's one of the most effective ways of sequestering carbon. In fact, it's the most effective way.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not only just, you know, you're buying carbon offsets, you're buying carbon offsets that are really actually drawing CO2 from the air and into the ground for a long-term sort of solution. The third portion is actually just a environmental impact assessment. So I did that in 2019 for the first year, and I basically just looked at my emissions, how I'm offsetting them, the kinds of clients that I work with, and how many pieces of print design was I responsible for putting into the world for my clients. And, you know, what paper stocks were those on, how were they printed? And so I just wrote up everything I could about my environmental impact and, you know, my work at owning the studio, and put it into a report. And it's basically like an annual report, but for environmental impact instead. And I published it. And so to me, that's a way of being incredibly transparent with my clients about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So there's no question about, oh, is she really offsetting? Who did she work with? You know, does she really use recycled paper? It's all there and it's all laid out. And if anyone really wants to dig into it, absolutely they can. Because I think that's really, really important in terms of both being credible, but also building trust.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you are, I mean, you're so passionate about it, but you're taking this very, very seriously, and you're educating other people to do the same and inspiring them to, you know, this is a good thing. You know, we can take steps. And I want to take this back to your journey, because I know that, like, obviously you said you were doing this for about a year and a half, and what was your journey leading up to that, and sort of, you know, how did this, I know we talked about it a little bit before, but just a little bit more about the story behind, because I think it's a very inspirational story, and that's what we're all about here, is inspiring people to think outside the box. Well, how can I make a difference? And I mean, when I think about graphic designers, I mean, I'm a photographer, I worked with a lot of graphic designers over the years, and I don't think any of this has really crossed anyone else's minds. I mean, maybe they have, but I don't see anybody else doing it to the extent that you're doing it, and you're making it a movement, and you're incorporating it into your business with your clients, educating them, and you're making a policy. Whereas I don't know if other graphic designers would take it that far to actually tell their clients, if you don't follow my way of doing things, I'm not going to work with you, kind of thing.
My way or the highway.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to, you know, how much you are taking this very seriously, and that how important it actually is. So yeah.
So basically, I'm not professionally trained in graphic design. It was a hobby in high school, and, you know, I thought I really wanted to work in museums. So I started taking jobs in museums, and I found that every single job that I took, I ended up as graphic designer. And it was sort of just one of those things that I was always found myself in that role. Eventually, I became an in-house designer for a dinosaur museum, and that was really fun for a couple of years. And so, you know, I sort of learned on the job the rules of design and how to design things. And so when I started my company, it was a little bit spontaneous, you could say. I was still in school at the time. I had left the dinosaur museum, and I just, you know, had a few sort of inquiries from friends and family, and I decided, why not? I need a business license number to be legal. And so I just created it. And for the first year or so, I really didn't have a direction with what I was doing. I didn't have a target demographic. I didn't have a vision, and I barely had a brand for myself, which is pretty embarrassing as a brand designer. So
it's all part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. So I was really sort of just like at odds with myself about this passion for sustainability in my personal life and my work as a business. And so I, you know, found the way of integrating them together. And, you know, that really sort of filled in all those gaps, and those question marks for me were about, what is my brand? Who am I trying to target? What are my goals in life? How am I going to okay, that was a tongue twister. How am I going to feel fulfilled in what I'm doing? And so, you know, I eventually created Little Fox Design, which has its own very clear brand and imagery and target demographic. And that was really fun for me to develop that. And I felt so confident in what I was doing after I rebranded, even though the concept was incredibly scary. I had no idea if it was going to work. I didn't know if anyone in Victoria was going to like want to work with me with the environmentally friendly standard. And I just sort of took a gamble on it and I went all in on it, and, you know, it worked out great. I, you know, have had my business basically just skyrocket since I've rebranded, which is fabulous.
That's gonna
And I think people people are really seeing the work that I'm putting in and the effort and the research that I'm doing, and why working with me as Little Fox Design is something that they can't get elsewhere. I'm the only person doing this in the city, at least. So, you know, that sort of real value add and separation from my competition, I think has really helped my business. And, you know, I think it just goes to show that if you're passionate about something, if you are willing to put the time in to learn whatever it is, and, you know, do the reading and, you know, put the work into building it, things will work out.
Yeah, and it's always it is really, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true that when, you know, we really believe in ourselves and we are so passionate about something and we really put ourselves out there and not worry about the competition, that's when we really thrive. And yeah, I mean, I am not surprised at all that you are thriving in what you're doing. I am wondering though, like, and I think, you know, because at this time, obviously, it's an unusual time that we're all going through with COVID-19 and everything. And I mean, even like I try to stay positive and inspired and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, reduce the anxiety and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, from where you're sitting, how do you stay inspired, or what or who inspires you on a daily basis? Um, I think that would be really helpful for people to know.
Okay. Um, right now, I'm taking a lot of consolation and inspiration, I guess you could say, from Naomi Klein's work. She's published several books on capitalism and, you know, the Green New Deal and sort of the policies that we need to move forward in terms of creating a better, safer planet for everyone. And so she's really writing a lot about climate justice and how individual action can, you know, create these movements that have real change, and how the sort of things we need to consider when we go forward and we start making this change. So, you know, things like, is it ethical to sell solar panels to Africa? No, but, you know, these are the sort of things that need to be considered in terms of going forward and how we actually, you know, lead this movement. Because if we lead it from a purely capitalist perspective, where we continue to make money off of the backs of people elsewhere in the global south, that's not an actual progressive way forward. Or if we move forward without providing healthcare for everyone, you know, especially like we're seeing in the States right now, people desperately need healthcare. And so if we move forward without that piece, that crucial piece of making sure that people are safe and healthy, that's not a progressive way forward. And, you know, it's not going to be the right solution. So I really am inspired by her work and her advocacy and her activism and how she shares information. So I've just been really, as I always do, reading more about the things that are stressful and, really, really scary, because this is an incredibly strange time. You know, we haven't experienced anything like this since maybe the Spanish flu. And, you know, most people that went through that aren't alive today. So it's really a transformational time in terms of our economy and politics. And, you know, I don't know where that's going to take us, but a shock is happening to our system, as Naomi Klein described it. And, you know, this is when change happens. So it's the possibility for incredible positive change. You know, out of the original Great Depression did come many social safety nets, socialist policies, environmental policies, and a great rise in the art movement. So I think there's a lot of things to be hopeful about and positive about, both looking to history and looking forward. Of course, it's also an incredibly scary time. And, you know, I think it's important to just, you know, take time for yourself and make sure that you're doing okay. I've been spending a lot of time caring for my plants and propagating my succulents. And, you know, I'm finding that that is incredibly inspiring and relaxing. So,
Things
you
that
know,
bring you joy.
mhm,
I love, like, from our conversation, what I'm getting is there's a lot to be said for educating ourselves, and knowledge is power. And um, I think that, you know, from these negative things that have happened in history, like the Spanish flu and whatever other um, problems that we've had over time, we always learn something. And it's interesting to see, you know, the countries like Canada and some European countries that are really kind of looking after their people, and, you know, because they've learned from previous experiences. And I think it's really important for everybody individually to, you know, seek out knowledge
mhm,
and, you know, learn from people like yourself, you know, the facts. And, you know, because that's I mean, it's common sense really, but I just see
mhm,
a lot of things, or, you know, I don't know, chatter that
yeah,
just doesn't make sense. You know, people aren't using their common sense. And
mhm,
but it really is important. You know, when I think about, you know, Canada, for example, I mean, stepping up to look after, because if the people aren't looked after, then they can't um, thrive. We can't learn, we can't grow, we can't look after things,
exactly.
and all that. So
Mhm,
yeah, I think that's really important.
yeah.
And so if you were to give some advice to, you know, people like business, if they could be business owners, they could just be anybody, you know, like,
There are, you know, people and corporate interests that are trying to present information in a certain way. And that is very prevalent in most of our main media, and how, for example, issues like climate crisis are reported on. You know, you can even, if you want to take a very extreme example, you can talk about Trump and how he talks about the environment. And I mean, he just blatantly lies. So there's that. But, you know, people believe that. And so there's a lot of, you know, vested power interests that are trying to convince us what the solutions are, how we need to go about, you know, saving the world. And most of those solutions are actually just in their own capitalist interests, which, you know, makes sense for them. But it becomes incredibly important that then you as an individual are trying to educate yourself on, you know, what exactly is the right solution, what exactly is the right thing to do, and, you know, how to sort of identify what in the media is, you know, perhaps painted a certain way and has rose tinted glasses on for whatever that perspective they're trying to put forward is, and what the actual truth is. Because there's a million ways to string statistics and make them say a certain thing. But you need the sort of the background to understand how things are being reported and how to actually interpret that. So, you know, a thing that's going around right now that's very, very popular is the concept that, well, with COVID-19, obviously it's, you know, killing people, and maybe the earth is cleansing itself because overpopulation, surely that's the issue. And the truth is, it's not at all the issue. The issue is more about animal agriculture and how we treat, you know, animals for the production of meat under capitalism. Because anytime you have all of these animals in a very close quarters environment and that they aren't being properly cared for, that's breeding ground for disease. But the thing is that even the emissions burden on overpopulation, I'll just run with this example. The emissions burden on overpopulation is mostly from North America, and mostly from the richest, like 5-10% of people. They have an undue responsibility and for more emissions than anyone else. So you could say, oh, well, you know, the world is overpopulated. All these countries in Africa are still growing their populations, but those people have almost no emissions responsibility because they don't have the same kind of consumption. So it's really just sort of placing the blame onto other countries and other people when we need to take responsibility for our own emissions and, you know, fix our own house first. So that ideology and that concept that overpopulation is the problem is really just a way of shoving the responsibility onto someone else, that's usually racially oriented. So people in China and people in Africa are usually the overpopulated countries. So I think, you know, that's important to understand too, is that these aren't sort of innocent ideas. They have an ideological framework that they're based off of, and it's important to understand what it means, because ultimately it is a racist idea. And so it's damaging to sort of talk that up and as a real solution when really it has nothing to do with climate change.
This is a forum for people to, think outside the box. Think about, what are they doing? How can I make a difference? How can I move things forward? What do I have to offer? And that's what my motivation for this show is really, is to show people that you don't have to be a Leonardo DiCaprio. You don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be a David Suzuki. Everyone can make, you are a young business owner who is making a difference. I think you're making a big impact, and you will continue to do so because you are educating yourself, you're sharing your knowledge, and you are making it a practice in your business. So I think it's really, really, you are a leader in the making, I would say, and you are making a difference right now. So we want to inspire other people who maybe don't think that they have the power to do anything. And but the point is that we all do. We have some, even if it impacts one person.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of the point of all this. So so in 5 years from now, what would you say your dreams and aspirations for your business and ultimate vision in how you want to make an impact in the world? So, jump forward to 5 years. Or earlier, maybe, I don't know. We don't have that much time.
Well, right now I have a huge educational focus. So, on my Instagram and my social media, I am really trying to educate the community of people that I'm building there. And, that's sort of been the most inspiring thing that has sort of shifted how I felt about the next 5 years. Because for a while there, I just thought it was going to be a design studio, even a sustainable design studio, and that's it. But I found that it's so incredibly inspiring talking with people who are interested in the same kinds of things as me, and seeing them, read my posts and go, oh, yesterday I saw that, I remembered your post that metallic foiling on business cards means it can't be recycled. And I told my client, no, don't do that. And they didn't do it. And that to me is like the greatest thing. The fact that I could share something and it had an impact on someone, and then they proceeded to advise their clients.
Great example of one small thing that stops somebody from using foil on their business cards.
Yeah. So it's these real little baby steps that kind of are the most interesting and inspiring thing to me. So I really want to build on that. I want to do more speaking engagements. I want to talk at conferences. I want to be able to do consulting for businesses, go in and have workshops, and really sort of have a bigger impact on what is happening. I hope that you can't hear the siren outside.
Okay.
I'm going to wait till it goes past.
That's okay. It's
all right. It's gone. So yeah, I really want to do more in the educational space, which is a surprise to me because I didn't realize that was a passion until I started doing it. And, I started doing it mostly because I just wanted to share the information, and when I went looking for the research, I couldn't find it. So I wanted to share what I was doing for others. And the response has been far more positive than I could have ever imagined. I have like 900 followers on Instagram now, which is still like little, but that's a lot, because when I started the sustainable design thing, I had about 300 and they weren't engaged. Like they were just sitting there. But now I have this whole community of people that, care about what I'm doing and are interested in learning more and, sharing and adapting their practices. And I think that's incredible. So, in the next 5 years, I'd love to build on that, create a course for green graphic design, create more maybe online workshops in this time about sustainable strategy or something, and really just move forward more with the, consulting sort of side of things and education. Of course, I love the brand design. I don't ever want to remove that from what I'm doing, but I love talking with people so much and sharing this information and helping other people make sustainable choices. So
that's amazing. I love your Instagram, and I love I love just all the little bits of information that are just, it's so relevant, and people are really, I think, yearning for that. Like, cause I think what I'm seeing is kind of like, especially during this time, people are really utilizing the time to educate themselves. We're all teachers, and I'm starting to say now that we're all change makers, because I really believe, especially in a time like this, we all want to make a difference. And I think it's really important to, I feel like I'm making a difference with this show because I want to highlight people like yourself who, you're not a celebrity, you're not a famous environmentalist like David, you know what I mean? Like you're um, a business owner who's super passionate about your future and the future of, future generations. And you love design, and so it's such a beautiful marriage. And I think that there's so many other businesses and people out there that have a lot to share and a lot to teach and a lot to give and a lot to that they can combine their gifts and talents and passions. So we're all kind of, like they say, in this together. But I mean, I think it's really great that you are, you have aspirations, you have a vision, and you are taking this very seriously and sharing it with the world. So that's really important. So I guess one of the questions I want to ask you, and then I want to talk about our work together a little bit in photography. But given the situation, because I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's not the right time to start a business. And I kind of have a different take. I feel like it is a good time to start a business. But I'd love to hear your take on it and how it pertains to, making a difference for the planet and kind of your vision of things.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I'm sort of torn on it, because I think there is the real potential for this to be a great time for people to work on something that they're passionate about and really potentially build that into a business, because most of us are at home. Some people still have to work their essential jobs, and that's sort of different. But it's so yeah, if there's something that you're really passionate about and you have the sort of like emotional energy and physical energy right now to actually start creating or building that, I think it's a good idea. But there's the other side too, where it's not like we're on a paid vacation. The globe is sort of collectively experiencing a traumatic event, and it can be very difficult to even find the motivation to get up and brush your hair and have a shower and put on makeup. That's like a lot to ask. And I think that the sort of difficulty on life has been just turned up into these basic tasks that are really you wouldn't think a second thought about them, suddenly become more difficult. So I think that if you have an idea and you are feeling like you emotionally can't work on it right now because of everything that's going on with COVID and the stress of not being able to see your friends and family, or maybe some of them are sick, or maybe you have real financial struggle because you're not in a country that is supporting you financially through this time, that's okay. It doesn't have to be the time where you start the next great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it should sort of, I think the best advice that I have for, like even just myself and talking with my friends about this is do as much work if you want to, if that's going to make you feel better, as you're able. And maybe that's 20 minutes a day, or maybe one day it's 6 hours. And whatever that is, that's okay. And there's no sort of like timeline. You do not have to hustle in this time if you do not want to. If you really want to, that's amazing and you should totally go for it. But it's okay to take the time off and just, look after yourself and make sure that you're doing okay, because this is a, really trying time, and, it is difficult. So don't feel bad if you can't do it right now. That's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And I see a lot of, well, I've seen businesses grow out of this, like even home delivery services and stuff like that. So I think that the possibilities are out there.
Yes.
And like you said, if you're feeling drawn or driven, it could be a good time, because I think new businesses are evolving out of this, just the situation, like what are the needs. And I think there is opportunity there to create sort of like, because we're all online now, it's like there could be some really interesting opportunities to grow some kind of business that's going to move us forward. And
hopefully, I mean, for some people, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, for some, it's going to completely destroy their business. So
yeah, I know there's always more sides to
yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to chat with you because I know we did some work together, and I do branding photography for business owners, and my kind of shift came. I've seen it over the years, just working with doing business headshots basically, and just seeing a lot of my clients who are making a difference, either in their business or in addition to their business. And so I know we started working together, and I'd love to know how photography has helped you in your business and your cause, and anything you can talk to that speaks to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I was actually having a conversation with a friend about this earlier. We were sort of sharing Instagram feeds back and forth that we really loved. And we both decided that the absolute make or break for your branding and your social media presence and your website is really good photography. You can have a beautiful website and a beautiful social media feed, but if your photography looks amateurish or not really on brand for you, it will not look good. You could be taking the most beautiful website template that available, or like the most beautifully designed website designed by an actual like web design person, and you could put bad photography in it and it's going to completely ruin it. So I think it's something that a lot of people don't really think about, or don't really even think to potentially invest in, but it's really, really important. I think more and more, especially with all of us online right now, people are more drawn to beautiful photography, beautiful images, and it's a real sort of it's a real key judgment piece that clients or potential customers make. Does your website look beautiful? Is the photography well done? Does it look professional and trustworthy? And I think that photography is really one of those things that is like a crucial element of the branding, and is definitely worth investing in.
I agree. And I mean, I always say that you want to, and I think like when I kind of use this tagline or slogan or whatever you want to call it, like you want your images to be you, and you can't be there in person, and we literally can't be there in person right now. So the idea of showing your face, showing up, how is that kind of, is that something that you practice? I know you have photos on your website of you. How has that made a difference, I think, in terms of connecting with your clients, potential clients, or people in general?
It's a good question. I have no idea for my own website. Just because like in terms of the traffic that I get on it, and like, clicks per like inquiries and whatever, not like the actual statistics of how my website is performing. I don't have enough sort of like data on it right now to be able to sort of break it down and see if there's a difference. However, I do know that on social media, the posts that have my, like me in them, like my face, do the best. People love that connection. People really like it when I go on like Instagram stories and talk about something. I don't do that a lot, but I know that I should. And I think having that, face behind I got tagged in a challenge today that was like, show your face behind the brand, person behind the brand or something. And so like I had to post a selfie. People love that stuff. There's so many different businesses and accounts out there that people want to connect with who you are, and they buy based on emotion. And being a real person on the internet and like showing photos of yourself and who you are and your personality makes a huge difference in terms of people wanting to do business with you, or even just like thinking that you're cool and wanting to be your friend, and then by proxy referring people to you. It doesn't have to be always a direct referral. That's sort of the amazing thing about social media, is that you can build advocates for yourself that maybe they're not doing business with you, but they will send people your way, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and we do. I mean, it's now we're online. We do, we see, I mean, we're judgmental creatures. So, and we see people like, yeah, I can connect with that person. And that's kind of why I've kind of moved more into, I guess they call it personal branding photography, or editorial style, is because I know one headshot only shows one aspect of a person. So I think it's really important to have photographs of you as well as your work, of course. And that really show different facets of your personality, and because people are going to connect with that and they lap it up. I mean, like you said, I mean, when you post a photo of yourself and combine it with a cool caption or just something that's authentic coming from you, people really do connect with that. And that's who you're going to really attract and connect with your people,
Mm-hmm.
just like we do in normal life. What, I guess, I know you talked about education. Is there something in particular that's next for you, or a project or something that you want to tell us about?
I think right now I'm sort of working on two major things. One is monthly webinars about a very like a specific topic, because the Instagram posts that I share on the carousels are all little like bite-sized information, and sometimes there's things that I want to talk about that I can't fit into like 8-10 slides. And so I really want to sort of build those into, proper lectures, I guess you could say, and have them be free and just let people stop in and listen if they want. And I think that's something that my audience has been asking for. So I'm pretty excited to sort of figure out how to do that and, launch that. And then the other thing I'm working on is a course for green graphic design practices, which is more of a long-term goal. But I think that's going to be really, really cool in the future to be able to build that up and launch it, have it be super comprehensive and really include all of the research that I've been doing. Because there's nothing really there's nothing like that out there. And the few times I've sort of like hinted at it to, my following or my friends there, they've been really, really excited. So I think it's definitely something that people are going to be interested in. And, I'm hoping to keep it as low cost and informative as I possibly can. Obviously, I still have to make money, but I really believe in education and research being as low cost as possible, if not free. So that's going to be my both goal and struggle, is to figure out how to appropriately price it and, what sort of, how am I going to market that sustainably?
Did you say that's geared more for graphic designers, or is that before? Okay.
Yeah, this one's going to be specifically for graphic designers. I'm sort of hoping to build out other courses, maybe about how to understand climate crisis or, similar topics that can be more accessible for other people too.
Okay.
Yeah, for now, the first one is going to just be for other designers.
Yeah, now I was going to ask about that, because I think, the everyday person, the everyday business person even, would like to know kind of what those should be. And so for us people who are not graphic designers, like what would be a couple of tips that you would impart to us on how we can, be better at, sustainable, if we're doing, say we're doing our own graphic design, or just in general, like in the home, like how could we be more, what are a couple tips that you could offer about, sustainable practices?
So probably the best tips I have are use 100% recycled paper when you can, in your printers, in your design work, when you're talking to like professional printers as well, specifying that. For local home printers, you can get something called sugar sheet paper, which is actually really cheap. It's safe for inkjet printers and laser printers, and it's basically made from agricultural waste sugarcane residue that they turn into paper, and it's made by a company in Vancouver, and it's really sustainable. It's like 4 times better than even 100% recycled paper.
Where do you get that?
You can get it at London Drugs and Staples and Monk Office Supplies, I think. It's basically like everywhere. You just need to know what to look for, but it's really cheap, and it looks indistinguishable from regular paper. The other thing that you can do is, look at your trash, like do a little like audit on, how much are you recycling in terms of like plastics, paper, what's going in the garbage? Are there any things like soft plastics that are consistently going in the garbage that maybe you could work on reducing? Like, could you shop more at bulk, or visit a zero waste store, or maybe just like try as an alternative? So one of the first things that we did actually was get reusable produce bags. So they're just like these like white mesh bags, and we just bring them with us to the grocery store before COVID, when we were allowed to do this. And you put your all your products in it. So your lettuce and your beets and your potatoes, and you just put them in the bags, and you can see what it is. It's see-through. And then you don't have to use the plastic bags every time.
That's
and it's sort of like a good way of adding on to the regular reusable bag, where you really, really reduce plastic. We've actually like noticed, because we're not allowed to do that right now, we're bringing in so much more plastic than we have been. And of course there's no way around that, and it's totally fine. That's just the way that we are right now, the way the world is. But like our plastic use has gone up like 300% because we're now having to use the store produce bags.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm. But you know, the bags are only like a couple dollars on Amazon, or even they have them for like $3 for like 3 or 5 at Save on Foods. So it's like a really low cost option. You can also sort of like reuse jars, like mustard jars that are glass and seal for bulk goods and like oatmeal or something. That's something we do a lot too. Just like really, really small things.
Yeah, it's amazing how little things can really make a huge difference.
Mhm.
Even without the planes flying overhead, I've noticed that the sky is so much clearer.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anyhow, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm so excited to get this out there. And I'm gonna put in the description like where people can find you, your website, and everything. So it's littlefoxdesign.com.
Yeah.
And then your social handles, Little Fox Design.
It's Little Fox Design Studio because
Oh.
Little Fox Design was taken.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah.
So that's a little important piece.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm really, thank you so much. You're a real inspiration. And I think that you've shared so many great tips. And more importantly, you're just a huge inspiration. And I think that's what people need now is, real inspiration to really, dig deep inside. Who am I? What am I doing here? What can I do? And really learn from people like yourself. So thank you so much. And
thank you for having me and for all the compliments. Thank you so much. I'm literally just trying to do my best, and my best is ever evolving, and I only know as much as I know in this moment. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's all we each can say. I mean, and this has been a big learning journey for me as well. Just kind of like, okay, like I was afraid to even do the show. So, but I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just doing my best, and if this helps at least one person, then I'll be happy.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's all we can do is just try our best and figure things out, and lean into comfortable discomfort with what we're doing, because that's how you grow and change. And yeah, I think you're doing great.